Hello, I hope you are doing well, and today we are going to be reading Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Sun Tzu, The Art of War is a book that dates way back to 5 BCE, and is a military strategy book. Now, I really don't know a ton about this book, but I do know that it's a very highly awarded book, even though it was written thousands of years ago. And really the only reason I'm reading this is just, I guess I'm memeing it. I don't know, Technoblade always says to read it, and I saw it at my local library, so here we go. So if you ever need to find where you left off, I will have all the 13 chapters timestamped. And just as a quick side note, I have a bit of a cold, so my voice might sound a little bit different. So let's get started at Chapter 1, Initial Estimations. Sun Tzu said, "Warfare is the greatest affair of state, the basis of life and death, the way to survival or extinction. It must be thoroughly pondered and analyzed. Therefore, structure it according to the following 5 factors. Evaluate it comparatively through estimations, and seek out its true nature. The first is termed the Tao, the second heaven, the third earth, the fourth generals, and the fifth, the laws, for military organization and discipline. The Tao causes the people to be fully in accord with the ruler. Thus, they will die with him, they will live with him, and not fear danger. Heaven encompasses yin and yang, cold and heat, and the constraints of the seasons. Earth encompasses far or near, difficult or easy, expansive or confined, fatal or tenable terrain. The general encompasses wisdom, credibility, benevolence, courage, and strictness. The laws, for military organization and discipline, encompass organization and regulations, the Tao of command, and the management of logistics. There are no generals who have not heard of these 5. Those who understand them will be victorious. Those who do not understand them will not be victorious. Thus, when making a comparative evaluation through estimations, seeking out its true nature, ask, which ruler has a Tao? Which general has greater ability? Who has gained the advantages of heaven and earth? Whose laws and orders are more thoroughly implemented? Whose forces are stronger? Whose officers and troops are better trained? Whose reward and punishments are clear? From these I will know victory and defeat. If a general follows my methods for estimation and you employ him, he will certainly be victorious and should be retained. If a general does not follow my methods for estimation and you employ him, he will certainly be defeated, so dismiss him. After estimating the advantages in accord with what you have heard, put it into effect with strategic power, supplemented by field tactics that respond to external factors. As for strategic power, it is controlling the tactical imbalance of power, in accord with the gains to be realized. Warfare is a way Tao of deception. Thus, although you are capable, display incapability to them. When committed to employing your forces, feign inactivity. When your objective is nearby, make it appear as if distant. When far away, create the illusion of being nearby. Display profits to entice them. Create disorder in their forces and take them. If they are substantial, prepare for them. If they are strong, avoid them. If they are angry, protrude them. Be differential to foster their arrogance. If they are rested, force them to exert themselves. If they are united, cause them to be separated. Attack where they are unprepared. Go forth where they will not expect it. These are the ways military strategists are victorious. They cannot be spoken of in advance. Before the engagement, one who determines in that ancestral temple that he will be victorious has found that the majority of factors are in his favor. Before the engagement, one who determines in the ancestral temple that he will not be victorious has found few factors are in his favor. If one who finds that the majority of factors favor him will be victorious, while one who has found few factors favor him, he will be defeated. What about someone who finds no factors in his favor? If I observe it from this perspective, victory and defeat will be apparent. Chapter 2. Waging War. Sun Tzu said, In general, the strategy for employing the military is this. If there are 1,000 four-horse attack chariots, 1,000 leather-armored support chariots, 100,000 mailed troops, and provisions are transported 1,000 li, then the domestic and external campaign expenses, the expenditures for advisors and guests, materials such as glue and lacquer, and providing chariots and armor will be 1,000 pieces of gold per day. Only then can an army of 100,000 be mobilized. When employing them in battle, a victory that is long in coming will blunt their weapons and dampen their ardor. If you attack cities, their strength will be exhausted. If you expose the army to a prolonged campaign, the state's resources will be inadequate. When the weapons have grown dull and spirits depressed, when our strength has been expended and our resources consumed, then the feudal lords will take advantage of our exhaustion to arise. Even though you have wise generals, they will not be able to achieve a good result. Thus in military campaigns, I have heard of awkward speed, but have never seen any skills in lengthy campaigns. No country has ever profited from protracted warfare. Those who do not thoroughly comprehend the dangers inherent in employing the army are incapable of truly knowing the potential advantages of military actions. One who excels in employing the military does not conscript the people twice or transport provisions a third time. If you obtain your equipment from within the state and rely on seizing provisions from the enemy, then the army's foodstuffs will be sufficient. The state is impoverished by the army when it transports provisions far off. When provisions are transported far off, the 100 surnames are impoverished. Those in proximity to the army will sell their goods expensively. When goods are expensive, the 100 surnames' wealth will be exhausted. When their wealth is exhausted, they will be extremely hard-pressed to supply their villages military impositions. When their strength has been expended and their wealth depleted, then the houses in the central plains will be empty. The expenses of the 100 surnames will be some 17ths of whatever they have. The rulers' irrecoverable expenditures, such as ruined chariots, exhausted horses, armor, helmets, arrows and crossbows, halberd-tipped and spear-tipped, large movable protective shields, strong oxen, and large wagons, will consume 6/10 of his resources. Thus, the wise general will concentrate on securing provisions from the enemy. 1 bushel of the enemy's foodstuffs is worth 20 of ours. 1 pickle of fodder is worth 20 of ours. Thus, what motivates men to slay the enemy is anger. What stimulates them to seize profits from the enemy is material goods. Thus, in chariot encounters, when 10 or more chariots are captured, reward the first to get one. Change their flags and pennants to ours. Intermix and employ them with our own chariots. Treat the captured soldiers well in order to nurture them for our use. This is referred to as conquering the enemy and growing stronger. Thus, the army values being victorious. It does not value prolonged warfare. Therefore, a general who understands warfare is master of fate for the people, ruler of the state's security or endangerment. Chapter 3. Planning Offensives. Sun Tzu said, "In general, the method for employing the military is this. Preserving the enemy's state capital is best. Destroying their state capital second best. Preserving their army is best. Destroying their army second best. Preserving their battalions is best. Destroying their battalions second best. Preserving their companies is best. Destroying their companies second best. Preserving their squads is best. Destroying their squads second best. For this reason, attaining 100 victories in 100 battles is not the pinnacle of excellence. Subjugating the enemy's army without fighting is the true pinnacle of excellence. Thus, the highest realization of warfare is to attack the enemy's plans. Next is to attack their alliances, next to attack their army, and the lowest is to attack their fortified cities. This tactic of attacking fortified cities is adopted only when unavoidable. Preparing large movable protective shields, armored assault wagons, and other equipment and devices will require 3 months. Building earthworks will require another 3 months to complete. If The general cannot overcome his impatience, but instead launches an assault wherein his men swarm over the walls like ants. He will kill 1/3 of his officers and troops, and the city will still not be taken. This is the disaster that results from attacking fortified cities. Thus, one who excels at employing the military subjugates other people's armies without engaging in battle, capture other people's fortified cities without attacking them, and destroys other people's states without prolonged fighting. He must fight under heaven with the paramount aim of preservation. Thus his weapons will not become dull, and the gains can be preserved. This is the strategy for planning offensives. In general, the strategy for employing the military is this. If your strength is 10 times theirs, surround them. If 5, then attack them. If double, then divide your forces. If you are equal in strength to the enemy, you can engage him. If fewer, you can circumvent him. If outmatched, you can avoid him. Thus a small enemy that acts inflexibly will become the captives of a large enemy. The general is the supporting pillar of the state. If his talents are all-encompassing, the state will invariably be strong. If the supporting pillar is marked by fissures, the state will invariably grow weak. Thus, there are 3 ways by which an army is put into difficulty by a ruler. He does not know that the 3 armies should not advance, but instructs them to advance, or does not know that the 3 armies should not withdraw in order to retreat. This is termed entangling the army. He does not understand the 3 armies' military affairs, but directs them in the same way as his civil administration. Then the officers will become confused. He does not understand the 3 armies' tactical balance of power, but undertakes responsibility for command. Then the officers will be doubtful. When the 3 armies are already confused and doubtful, the danger of the feudal lords taking advantage of the situation arises. This is referred to as a disordered army drawing another on to victory. Thus, there are 5 factors from which victory can be known. One who knows when he can fight and when he cannot fight will be victorious. One who recognizes how to employ large and small numbers will be victorious. One whose upper and lower ranks have the same desires will be victorious. One who, fully prepared, waits the unprepared will be victorious. One whose generals capable and not interfered with by the ruler will be victorious. These 5 are the way to know victory. Thus it is said that one who knows the enemy and knows himself will not be endangered in 100 engagements. One who does not know the enemy, but knows himself, will sometimes be victorious, sometimes met with defeat. One who knows neither the enemy nor himself will invariably be defeated in every engagement. Chapter 4. Military Disposition. Sun Tzu said, "In antiquity, those that excelled in warfare first made themselves unconquerable, in order to await the moment when the enemy could be conquered. Being unconquerable lies within yourself. Being conquerable lies within the enemy. Thus, one who excels in warfare is able to make himself unconquerable, but cannot necessarily cause the enemy to be conquerable. Thus it is said, a strategy for conquering the enemy can be known, but yet not possible to implement. One who cannot be victorious assumes a defensive posture. One who can be victorious attacks. In these circumstances, by assuming a defensive posture, strength will be more than adequate, whereas in offensive actions it would be inadequate. Those who excel at defense bury themselves away below the lowest depths of earth. Those who excel at defense move from above the greatest heights of heaven. Thus they are able to preserve themselves and attain complete victory. Perceiving a victory does not surpass what the masses could know, is not the pinnacle of excellence. Wrestling victories, for which all under heaven complain your excellence, is not the pinnacle of excellence. Thus lifting an autumn hair cannot be considered great strength. Seeing the sun and moon cannot be considered acute vision. Hearing the sound of thunder cannot be considered having sensitive ears. Those that the ancients referred to as excelling at warfare conquered those who were easy to conquer. Thus the victories of those that excelled in warfare were not marked by fame, for wisdom or courageous achievement. Thus their victories were free from errors. One who is free from errors directs his measures towards certain victory, conquering those who are already defeated. Thus, one who excels at warfare first establishes himself in a position where he cannot be defeated while not losing any opportunity to defeat the enemy. For this reason, the victorious army first realizes the conditions for victory, and then seeks to engage in battle. The vanquished army fights first, and then seeks victory. One who excels at employing the military cultivates the Tao and preserves the laws. Therefore, he is able to be the regulator of victory and defeat. As for military methods, the first is termed measurement, the second estimation of forces, the third calculation of numbers of men, the fourth weighing relative strength, and the fifth victory. Training gives birth to measurement. Measurement produces the estimation of forces. Estimation of forces gives rise to calculating the numbers of men. Calculating the numbers of men gives rise to weighing strength. Weighing strength gives birth to victory. Thus, the victorious army is like a ton compared with an ounce, while the defeated army is like an ounce weighed against a ton. The combat of the victorious is like the sudden release of a pent-up torrent down 1,000-fathom gorge. This is the strategic disposition of force. Chapter 5. Strategic Military Power. Sun Tzu said, "In general, commanding a large number is like commanding a few. It is a question of dividing up the numbers. Fighting with a large number is like fighting with a few. It is a question of configuration and designation. What enabled the masses of the three armies invariably to withstand the enemy without being defeated are the unorthodox and orthodox. If wherever the army attacks, it is like the whetstone thrown against an egg. It is due to the vacuous and substantial. In general, in battle one engages with the orthodox and gains victory through the unorthodox. Thus one who excels at sending forth the unorthodox is inexhaustible as heaven, as unlimited as the Yangtze and Yellow rivers. What reach an end and begin again are the sun and moon. What die are reborn are the 4 seasons. The notes do not exceed 5, but the changes of the 5 notes can never be fully heard. The colors do not exceed 5, but the changes of the 5 colors can never be completely seen. The flavors do not exceed 5, but the changes of the 5 flavors can never be completely tasted. In warfare and strategic configurations of power do not exceed the unorthodox and orthodox, but the changes of the unorthodox and orthodox can never be completely exhausted. The unorthodox and orthodox mutually produce each other, just like an endless cycle. Who can exhaust them? The strategic configuration of power is visible on the onrush of pent-up water, tumbling stones along. The effect of constraints is visible in the onrush of a bird, of prey breaking the bones of its target. Thus the strategic configuration of power of those that excel in warfare is sharply focused. Their constraints are precise. Their strategic configuration of power is like a fully drawn crossbow. Their constraints like the release of the trigger. Intermixed and turbulent, the fighting appears chaotic, but they cannot be made disordered. In turmoil and confusion, their deployment is circular, and they cannot be defeated. Simulated chaos is given birth from control. The illusion of fear is given birth from courage. Feigned weakness is given birth from strength. Order and disorder are a question of numbers. Courage and fear are a question of the strategic configuration of power. Strength and weakness are a question of the deployment of forces. Thus, one who excels at moving the enemy deploys in a configuration to which the enemy must respond. He offers something that the enemy must seize. With profit he moves them. With the foundation he awaits them. Thus, one who excels at warfare seeks victory through the strategic configuration of power, not from the reliance on men. Thus he is able to select men and employ strategic power. One who employs strategic power commands men in battle, as if he were rolling logs and stones. The nature of wood and stone is to be quiet when stable, but to move when on precipitous ground. If they are square, they stop. If round, they tend to move. Thus, the strategic power of one who excels at employing men in warfare is comparable to rolling round boulders down 1,000-fathom mountain. Such is the strategic configuration of power. Chapter 6. Vacuity and Substance. Sun Tzu said, "In general, whoever occupies the battleground first and awaits the enemy will be at ease. Whoever occupies the battleground afterward and must race to the conflict will be fatigued. Thus, one who excels at warfare compels men and is not compelled by other men. In order to cause the enemy to come, of their own violation, extend some apparent profit. In order to prevent the enemy from coming forth, show them the potential harm. Thus, if the enemy is rested and you can tire him, if he is well fed, you can make him hungry. If he is at rest, you can move him. Go forth to positions to which he must race. Race forth where he does not expect it. To travel 1,000 li without becoming fatigued, traverse unoccupied terrain. To ensure taking the objective in an attack, strike positions that are left undefended. To be certain of an impregnable defense, secure positions that the enemy will not attack. Thus, when someone excels in attacking, the enemy does not know where to mount his defense. When someone excels at defense, the enemy does not know where to attack. Subtle, it approaches the formless. Spiritual, it attains the soundless. Thus he can be the enemy's master of fate. To effect an unhampered advance, strike their vacuities. To effect a retreat that cannot be overtaken, employ unmatchable speed. Thus, if I want to engage in combat, even though the enemy has high ramparts and deep moats, he cannot avoid doing battle, because I attacked objectives he must rescue. If I do not want to engage in combat, even though I merely draw a line on the ground and defend it, he will not be able to engage me in a battle, because we thwart his movements. Thus, if I determine the enemy's disposition of forces, while I have no perceptible form, I can concentrate my forces while the enemy is fragmented. If we are concentrated into a single force while he is fragmented into 10, then we attack him with 10 times his strength. Thus we are many and the enemy is few. If we can attack his few with our many, those we engage in battle will be severely constrained. The location where we will engage the enemy must not become known to them. If it is not known, then the positions they must prepare to defend will be numerous. The positions the enemy prepares to defend are numerous, and the forces we will engage will be few. Thus, if they prepare to defend the front, to the rear there will be few men. If they defend the rear, in the front there will be few. If they prepare to defend the left flank, then the right there will be few men. If they prepare to defend the right flank, then on the left there will be few men. If there is no position left undefended, then there will not be any place for more than a few. The few are the ones who prepare against others. The many are the ones who make others prepare against them. Thus, if one knows the field of battle and knows the day of battle, he can traverse 1,000 li and assemble to engage in combat. If he does not know the field of battle, nor know the day for the battle, then the left flank cannot aid the right, nor the right flank aid the left. The front cannot aid the rear, nor the rear aid the front. How much more so when the distant are some tens of li away, and they near several li apart? As I analyze it, even though your army is numerous, of what great advantage is it to them for attaining victory? Thus I say victory can be achieved. Even though the enemy is more numerous, they can be forced not to fight. Thus critically analyze them, to know that the estimations for gain and loss. Stimulate them to know the patterns of their movement and stopping. Determine their disposition of force, to know the tenable and fateable terrain. Probe them to know where they have an excess, or where an insufficiency. Thus the pinnacle of military development approaches the formless. If it is formless, then even the deepest spy cannot discern it, or the wise make plans against it. In accord with the enemy's disposition, we impose measures on the masses that produce victory, but the masses are unable to fathom them. Men all know that disposition by which we attain victory, but no one knows the configuration through which we control the victory. Thus a victorious battle is not repeated. The configurations of response to the enemy are inexhaustible. Now the army's disposition of force is like water. Water's configuration avoids heights and races downward. The army's disposition of forces avoids substantial and strength of vacuous. Water configures its flow in accord with the terrain. The army controls its victory in accord with the enemy. Thus, the army does not maintain any constant strategic configuration of power. Water has no constant shape. One who is able to change and transform in accord with the enemy and wrest victory is termed spiritual. Thus, none of the 5 phases constantly dominates. The 4 seasons do not have constant positions. The sun shines for longer and shorter periods, and the moon wanes and waxes. Chapter 7. Military Combat. Sun Tzu said, "In general, the strategy for employing the army is this. From the time the general sees his commands from the ruler, unites the armies, and assembles the masses to confronting the enemy and encamping, there is nothing more difficult than military combat. In military combat, what is most difficult is turning the circuitous into the straight, turning adversity into advantage. Thus, if you make the enemy's path circuitous and entice them with profit, although you set out after them, you will arrive before them. This results from knowing the tactics of the circuitous and the direct. Thus, combat between armies is advantageous. Combat between masses is dangerous. If the entire army contends for advantage, you will not arrive on time. If you reduce the army's size to contend for advantage, your baggage and heavy equipment will suffer losses. For this reason, if you abandon your armor and heavy equipment to race forward day and night without encamping, covering 2 days' normal distance at a time, marching forward 100 li to contend for gain, the 3 armies' generals will be captured. The strong will be the first to arrive, while the exhausted will follow. With such tactics, only 1 in 10 will reach the battle site. If one contends for 50 li away, it will cause the general of the upper army to stumble, and by following such tactics, half the men will reach the objective. If you contend for gain at 30 li, then 2/3 of the army will reach the objective. Accordingly, if the army does not have baggage and heavy equipment, it will be lost. If it does not have provisions, it will be lost. If it does not have stores, it will be lost. Thus, one who does not know the plans of the feudal lords cannot prepare alliances beforehand. Someone unfamiliar with the mountains and forests, gorges and defiles, the shape of marshes and wetlands, cannot advance the army. One who does not employ local guides cannot gain advantages of terrain. Thus the army is established by deceit, moves for advantage, and changes through segmenting and reuniting. Thus its speed is like the wind, its slowness like the forest, its invasion and plundering like a fire. Unmoving, it is like the mountains. It is as difficult to know as the darkness. In movement, it is like thunder. When you plunder a district, divide the wealth among your troops. When you enlarge your territory, divide the profits. Take control of the strategic balance of power, and move. The one who first understands the tactics of the circuitous and the direct will be victorious. This is the strategy for military combat. The military administration states, because they could not hear each other, they made gongs and drums. Because they could not see each other, they made pennants and flags. Gongs, drums, pennants, and flags are the means to unify the men's ears and eyes. When the men have been unified, the courageous will not be able to advance alone. The fearful will not be able to retreat alone. This is the method for employing large numbers. Thus, in night battles, make the fires and drums numerous, and in daylight battles, make the flags and pennants numerous in order to change the men's eyes and ears. The chi of the 3 armies can be snatched away. The commanding general's minds can be seized. For this reason, in the morning, their chi is ardent. During the day, their chi becomes indolent. At dusk, their chi is exhausted. Thus, one who excels at employing the army avoids their ardent chi and strikes when it is indolent or exhausted. This is the way to manipulate chi. In order, await the disordered. In tranquility, await the clamorous. This is the way to control the mind. With the near, await the distant. With the rested, await the fatigued. With the sated, await the hungry. This is the way to control strength. Do not intercept well-ordered flanks. Do not attack well-regulated formations. This is the way to control changes. Thus the strategy for employing the military. Do not approach high mountains. Do not confront those who have hills behind them. Do not pursue feigned retreats. Do not attack animated troops. Do not swallow an army acting as bait. Do not obstruct an army retreating homeward. If you besiege an army, you must leave an outlet. Do not press an exhausted invader. These are the strategies for employing the military. Chapter 8. 9 Changes. Sun Tzu said, "In general, the strategy for employing the military is this. After the general has received his commands from the ruler, united the armies and assembled the masses. Do not encamp on entrapping terrain. Unite with your allies in focal terrain. Do not remain on isolated terrain. Make strategic plans for encircled terrain. On fatal terrain you must do battle. There are roads that are not followed. There are armies that are not attacked. There are fortified cities that are not assaulted. There is terrain for which one does not control. There are commands from the ruler that are not accepted." Thus, the general who has a penetrating understanding of the advantages of the 9 changes knows how to employ the army. If a general does not have a penetrating understanding of the advantages of the 9 changes, even though he is familiar with the topography, he will not be able to realize the advantages of terrain. One who commands an army but does not know the techniques for the 9 changes, even though he is familiar with the 5 advantages, will not be able to control men. For this reason, the wise must contemplate the intermixture of gain and loss. If they discern advantage in difficult situations, their efforts can be trusted. If they discern harm and prospective advantage, difficulties can be resolved. Accordingly, subjugate the feudal lords with potential harm, labor the feudal lords with numerous affairs, and have the feudal lords race after profits. Thus the strategy for employing the army. Do not rely on their coming, but depend on us having the means to await them. Do not rely on their not attacking, but depend on us having an unassailable position. Thus generals have 5 dangerous character traits. One committed to dying can be slain. One committed to living can be captured. One easily angered and hasty to act can be insulted. One obsessed with being scrupulous and untainted can be shamed. One who loves the people can be troubled. Now these 5 dangerous traits are in excess in a general, potential disaster for employing the army. The army's destruction and the general's death will invariably stem from these 5, so they must be investigated. Chapter 9. Maneuvering the Army. Sun Tzu said, "As for developing the army and fathoming the enemy, to cross mountains, follow the valleys, search out tenable ground, and occupy the heights. If the enemy holds the heights, do not climb up to engage them in battle. This is the way to deploy an army in the mountains. After crossing rivers, you must distance yourself from them. If the enemy is fording a river to advance, do not confront them in the water. When half their forces have crossed, it will be advantageous to strike them. If you want to engage the enemy in battle, do not array your forces near the river to confront the invader, but look for tenable ground and occupy the heights. Do not confront the current's flow. This is the way to deploy the army where there are rivers. When you cross salt marshes and wetlands, concentrate on quickly getting away from them. Do not remain. If you engage in battle in marshes or wetlands, you must stay in areas with marsh grass. Keep rows of trees at your back. This is the way to deploy the army in marshes and wetlands. On level plains, deploy on easy terrain with the right flank positioned with high ground to the rear, fatal terrain to the fore, and tenable terrain to the rear. This is the way to deploy on the plains. These 4 deployments, advantageous to the army, are the means by which the Yellow Emperor conquered the 4 emperors. Now the army likes heights and abhors low areas, esteems the sunny yang, and disdains the shady yin. It nourishes life and occupies the substantial. An army that avoids 100 illnesses is said to be certain of victory. Where there are hills and embankments, you must occupy the yang side, keeping them to your right rear. This is to the army's advantage and exploits the natural assistance of the terrain. When it rains upstream, foam appears. If you want to cross over, wait until it settles. You must quickly get away from deadly configurations of terrain, such as precipitous gorges with mountain torrents, Heaven's Well, Heaven's Jail, Heaven's Net, Heaven's Pit, and Heaven's Fissure. Do not approach them. When we keep them at a distance, the enemy is forced to approach them. When we face them, the enemy is compelled to have them at the rear. When on the flanks, the army encounters ravines and defiles, wetlands with reeds and tall grass, mountains, forests, or areas with heavy and tangled undergrowth. You must thoroughly search them, because they are places where an ambush or spies would be concealed. If an enemy is in close proximity, remain silent. They are relying on the tactical occupation of ravines. If while far off they challenge you to battle, they want you to advance because they occupy easy terrain to their advantage. If large numbers of trees move, they are approaching. If there are many visible obstacles and heavy grass, it is to make us suspicious. If the birds take flight, there is an ambush. If the animals are afraid, enemy forces are mounting a sudden attack. If dust rises high above in a sharply defined column, chariots are coming. If it is low and broad, the infantry is advancing. If it is dispersed in thin shafts, they are gathering firewood. If it is sparse, coming and going, they are encamping. One who speaks differentially but increases his preparations will advance. One who speaks belligerently and advances hastily will retreat. One whose light chariots first fan out to the sides is deploying for battle. One who seeks peace without setting any prior conditions is executing a stratagem. One whose troops race off but who deploys his army into formation is implementing a predetermined schedule. One whose troops half advance and half retreat is enticing you. Those who stand about leaning on their weapons are hungry. If those who draw water drink first, they are thirsty. When they see potential gain, but do not know whether to advance, they are tired. Where birds congregate, it is empty. If the enemy cries out at nights, they are afraid. If the army is turbulent, the general lacks severity. If their flags and pennants move about, they are in chaos. If the officers are angry, they are exhausted. If they kill their horses and eat the meat, the army lacks grain. If they hang up their cooking utensils and do not return to camp, they are an exhausted invader. One whose troops repeatedly congregate in small groups here and there, whispering together, has lost the masses. One who frequently grants rewards is in deep distress. One who frequently imposes punishments is in great difficulty. One who is at first excessively brutal and then fears the masses is the pinnacle of stupidity. One who has emissaries come forth with offerings wants to rest for a while. If their troops are around and approach our forces only to maintain their positions without engaging in battle or breaking off the confrontation, you must carefully investigate it. The army does not esteem the number of troops being more numerous, for it only means one cannot aggressively advance. It is sufficient for you to muster your own strength, analyze the enemy, and take them. Only someone who lacks strategic planning and slights an enemy will inevitably be captured by others. If you impose punishments on the troops before they have become attached, they will not be submissive. If they are not submissive, they will be difficult to employ. If you do not impose punishments after the troops have become attached, they cannot be used. Thus, if you command them with the civil and unify them through the martial, this is what is referred to as being certain to take them. If orders are consistently implemented to instruct the people, then the people will submit. If orders are not consistently implemented to instruct the people, then the people will not submit. One whose orders are consistently carried out has established a mutual relationship with the people. Chapter 10. Configurations of Terrain. Sun Tzu said, "The major configurations of terrain are accessible, suspended, stalemated, constricted, precipitous, and expansive. If we can go forth and the enemy can also advance, it is termed accessible. In an accessible configuration, first occupy the heights and yang side, and improve the routes for transporting provisions. Then when we engage in battle, it will be advantageous. If we can go forth, but it will be difficult to return, it is termed suspended. In a suspended configuration, if they are unprepared to go forth and conquer them, If the enemy is prepared and we sally forth without being victorious, it would be difficult to turn back. It is not advantageous. If it is not advantageous for us to go forth, nor advantageous for the enemy to come forward, it is termed stalemated. In a stalemated configuration, even though the enemy tries to entice us with profit, we do not go forth. Withdraw our forces and depart. If we strike them when half the enemy has come forth, it will be advantageous. As for constricted configurations, if we occupy them first, we must fully deploy throughout them in order to await the enemy. If the enemy occupies them first and fully deploys in them, do not follow in them. If they do not fully deploy in them, then follow them in. As for precipitous configurations, if we occupy them, we must hold the heights and yang sides to await the enemy. If the enemy occupies them first, withdraw our forces and depart. Do not follow them. As for expansive configurations, if our strategic power is equal, it will be difficult to provoke them to combat. Engaging in combat will not be advantageous. Now these 6 are the Tao of terrain. Any general who understands responsibility for command cannot but investigate them. Thus there are 6 types of ill-fated armies: running off, lax, sinking, crumbling, chaotic, and routed. Now these 6 are not disasters brought about by heaven and earth, but by the general's errors. Now if, when their strategic power is equal, one attacks 10, this is called a running off. If the troops are strong but the officers are weak, it is termed lax. If the officers are strong but the troops are weak, it is termed sinking. If the higher officers are angry and insubordinate, engaging the enemy themselves out of unrestrained anger, while the general does not yet know their capability, is termed crumbling. If the general is weak and not strict, unenlightened in his instructions and leadership, the officers and troops lack constant duties, and their deployment of troops into formation is askew. It is termed chaotic. If the general, unable to fathom the enemy, engages a large number with a small number, attacks the strong with the weak, while the army lacks a properly selected vanguard, it is termed routed. Now these 6 are the Tao of defeat. Any general who undertakes responsibility for command cannot but investigate them. Configuration of terrain is an aid to the army. Analyzing the enemy, taking control of victory, estimating ravines and defiles, the distant and near, is the Tao of the superior general. One who knows these and employ them in combat will certainly be victorious. One who does not know these or employ them in combat will certainly be defeated. If the Tao of warfare indicates certain victory, even though the ruler was instructed that combat should be avoided, if you must engage in battle, it is permissible. If the Tao of warfare indicates you will not be victorious, even though the ruler instructs that you engage in battle, not fighting is permissible. Thus a general who does not advance to seek fame, nor fail to retreat to avoid being charged with the capital offense of retreating, but seeks only to preserve the people and gain advantage for the ruler, is the state's treasure. When the general regards his troops as young children, they will advance into the deepest valleys with him. When he regards the troops as his beloved children, they will be willing to die with him. If they are well treated but cannot be employed, if they are loved but cannot be commanded, or when in chaos they cannot be governed, they may be compared to arrogant children and cannot be used. If I know our troops can attack, but do not know the enemy cannot be attacked, it is only halfway to victory. If I know the enemy can be attacked, but do not realize our troops cannot attack, it is only halfway to victory. Knowing that the enemy can be attacked, and knowing that our army can effect the attack, but not knowing the terrain is not suitable for combat, it's only halfway to victory. Thus one who truly knows the army will never be deluded when he moves, never be impoverished when initiating an action. Thus it is said, if you know them and know yourself, your victory will not be imperiled. If you know heaven and know earth, your victory can be complete. Chapter 11. 9 Terrains. Sun Tzu said, "The strategy for employing the military is this. There's dispersive terrain, light terrain, contentious terrain, traversable terrain, focal terrain, heavy terrain, entrapping terrain, encircled terrain, and fatal terrain. When the feudal lord fights in their own territory, it is dispersive terrain. When they enter someone else's territory, but not deeply, it is light terrain. If when we occupy it, it will be advantageous to us, while they occupy it, it will be advantageous to them. It is contentious terrain. When we can go, and they can also come, it is traversable terrain. Land of the feudal lords surrounded on 3 sides, such that whoever arrives the first will gain the masses of all under heaven, is focal terrain. When one penetrates deeply into enemy territory, bypassing numerous cities, it is heavy terrain. Where there are mountains and forests, ravines and defiles, wetlands and marshes, wherever the road is difficult to negotiate, it is entrapping terrain. Where the entrance is constricted, the return is circuitous, and with a small number they can strike our masses, it is encircled terrain. Where if one fights with intensity, he will survive, but if he does not fight with intensity, he will perish. It is fatal terrain. For this reason, on dispersive terrain, do not engage the enemy. On light terrain, do not stop. On contentious terrain, do not attack. On traversable terrain, do not allow your forces to become isolated. On focal terrain, unit and form alliances with nearby feudal lords. On heavy terrain, plunder for provisions. On entrapping terrain, move through quickly. On encircled terrain, use strategy. On fatal terrain, engage in battle. In antiquity, those who were referred to as excelling in the employment of the army were able to keep the enemy's forward and rear forces from connecting, the many and few to each other's rescue, the upper and lower ranks from trusting each other, the troops to be separated, unable to assemble, or when assembled, not to be well ordered. They moved when it was advantageous, halted when it was not advantageous. If I dare ask, if the enemy is numerous, disciplined, and about to advance, how should we respond to them? I would say, first seize something that they love, for then they will listen to you. It is the nature of the army to stress speed, to take advantage of the enemy's absence, to travel unanticipated roads, and to attack when they are not alert. In general, the tale of an invader is that when one has penetrated deeply into the enemy territory, the army will be unified, and the defenders will not be able to conquer you. If one forges in the fertile countryside, then the 3 armies will have enough to eat. If you carefully nurture them and do not overlabor them, their chi will be united, and their strength will be at maximum. When you mobilize the army and form strategic plans, you must be unfathomable. Cast them into positions from which there is nowhere to go, and they will die without retreating. If there is no escape from death, the officers and soldiers will fully exhaust their strength. When the soldiers and officers have penetrated deeply into enemy territory, they will cling together. When there is no alternative, they will fight. For this reason, even though the soldiers are not instructed, they are prepared. Without seeking it, their cooperation is obtained. Without covenants, they are close together. Without issuing orders, they are reliable. Prohibit amends, eliminate doubts, they will die without other thoughts. If our soldiers do not have excessive wealth, it is not because they detest material goods. If they do not live long lives, it is not because they abhor longevity. On the day that the orders are issued, the tears of the soldiers who are sitting will soak their sleeves, while the tears of those laying down will roll down their cheeks. However, if you throw them into their hopeless situation, they will have the courage of Chu or Ki. Thus, one who excels at employing the army may be compared to the snake. The snake is found on Mount Chain. If you strike its head, the tail will respond. If you strike its tail, the head will respond. If you strike the middle of the body, both the head and the tail will react. If I dare ask, can we make the army like the snake? I would say we can. For example, the people of Wu and Yu hate each other. But if fording a river in the same boat they encounter severe wind, their efforts to rescue each other will be like their left and right hands. For this reason, fettering the horses and burying the chariot wheels are inadequate to rely on to prevent the soldiers from fleeing. Unify their courage to be as one through the tale of administration. Realize the appropriate employment of the hard and soft through the patterns of terrain. Thus, one who excels at employing the army leads them by the hands as if they were only one man, so they cannot avoid it. It is essential for a general to be tranquil and obscure, upright and self-disciplined, and able to stupefy the eyes and ears of the officers and troops, keeping them ignorant. He alters his management of affairs and changes his strategies to keep other people from recognizing him. He shifts his position and reverses indirect routes to keep other people from being able to anticipate him. At the moment the general is designated with him, it will be as if they ascended a height and abandoned their ladders. The general advances with them deep into the territory of the feudal lords, and then releases the trigger. He commands them as if racing a herd of sheep. They are driven away, driven back, but no one knows where they are going. Assembling the masses of the three armies, casting them into danger, is a responsibility of the general. The 9 transformations of terrain, the advantages deriving from contraction and expansion, the patterns of human emotions, must be investigated. In general, the tale of the invader is this. When the troops have penetrated deeply, they will be unified, but where only shallowly, they will be inclined to scatter. When the army has left the state, crossed the enemy's borders, and is on campaign, it is isolated terrain. When the 4 sides are open to others, this is focal terrain. When you have advanced deeply, it is heavy terrain. If you have penetrated only shallowly, it is light terrain. If you have strongholds behind you and constrictions before you, it is encircled terrain. If there is no place to go, it is fatal terrain. For this reason, on dispersive terrain, I unify their will. On light terrain, I have them grouped together. On contentious terrain, I race our rear elements forward. On traversable terrain, I focus on defense. On focal terrain, I solidify our alliances. On heavy terrain, I ensure a continuous supply of provisions. On entrapping terrain, I speedily advance along the roads. On encircled terrain, I obstruct any openings. On fatal terrain, I show them that we will not live. Thus it is the nature of the army to defend when encircled, to fight fervently when unavoidable, to follow orders when compelled by circumstances. For this reason, one who does not know the plans of the feudal lords cannot engage preparatory alliances. One who does not know the topography of mountains and forests, ravines and defiles, wetlands and marshes cannot maneuver the army. One who does not employ local guides will not secure advantages of terrain. One who does not know one of these 4 or 5 cannot command the army of a hegemon or true king. Now when the army of a hegemon or true king attacks a great state, their masses are unable to assemble. When it applies its awesomeness to the enemy, their alliances cannot be sustained. For this reason, it does not contend with any alliances under heaven. It does not nurture the authority of others under heaven. Have faith in yourself. Apply your awesomeness to the enemy. Then his cities can be taken, his state can be subjugated. Bestow rewards not required by law, impose exceptional governmental orders. Direct the masses of these 3 armies through commanding one man. Press affairs upon them. Do not explain the purpose to them. Compel them with prospects for profit, but do not inform them about the potential harm. Cast them into hopeless situations, and they will be preserved. Have them penetrate fatal terrain, and they will live. Only after the masses have penetrated dangerous terrain will they be able to craft victory out of defeat. The prosecution of military affairs lies in according with and learning in detail the enemy's intentions. If one then focuses strength toward the enemy, strikes 1,000 li away, and kills their general, it is termed being skillful and capable in completing military affairs. For this reason, on the day the government mobilizes, the army close the passes, destroy all tallies, and do not allow their emissaries to pass through. Hold intense strategic discussions in the upper hall of the temple in order to bring about the execution of affairs. If the enemy opens the door, you must race in. Attack what they love first. Do not fix any time for battle. Assess and react to the enemy in order to determine the strategy for battle. For this reason, at first, be like a virgin at home. Later, when the enemy opens the door, be like a fleeting rabbit. The enemy will be unable to withstand you. Chapter 12. Incendiary Attacks. Sun Tzu said, there are 5 types of incendiary attack. The first is to incinerate man. The second to incinerate provisions. The third to incinerate supply trains. The fourth to incinerate armories. And the fifth to incinerate formations. Implementing an incendiary attack depends on the proper conditions. Equipment for incendiary attacks should be fully prepared before required. Launching an incendiary attack has its appropriate seasons, igniting the fire the proper days. As for the seasons, it is the time of the dry spell. As for the day, when the moon is in the Chi, Pi, I, or Chen. When it is in these 4 lunar lodges, these are the days the wind will rise. In general, in incendiary warfare, you must respond to the 5 changes of fire. If fires are started within their camp, then you should immediately respond with an attack from outside. If fires are ignited but their army remains quiet, then wait, do not attack. When they flare into conflagration, if you can follow up, then do so. If you cannot, then desist. If the attack can be launched from outside without relying on inside assistance, initiate it at an appropriate time. If fires are ignited upward, do not attack downwind. Winds that arise in the daytime will persist. Those that arise at night will stop. Now the army must know the 5 changes of fire in order to defend against them at the astrologically appropriate times. Thus, using fire to aid an attack is enlightened. Using water to assist an attack is powerful. Water can be used to sever, but cannot be employed to seize. Now, if someone is victorious in battle and succeeds in attack but does not exploit the achievement, it is disastrous, and his fate should be termed wasteful and tarrying. Thus it is said, the wise general ponders it, the good general cultivates it. If it is not advantageous, do not move. If objectives cannot be attained, do not employ the army. Unless endangered, do not engage in warfare. The ruler cannot mobilize the army out of personal anger. The general cannot engage in battle because of personal frustrations. When it is advantageous, move. When not advantageous, stop. Anger can revert to happiness. Annoyance can revert to joy. But a vanquished state cannot be revived. The dead cannot be brought back to life. Thus the unenlightened ruler is cautious about it. The good general respectful of it. This is the Tao for bringing security to the state and preserving the army intact. Chapter 13. Employing spies. Sun Tzu said, when you send forth an army of 100,000 on a campaign, marching them at 1,000 li, the expenditures of the common people and the contributions of the feudal house will be 1,000 pieces of gold per day. Those inconvenienced and troubled both within and without the border, who were exhausted on the road or unable to pursue their agricultural work, will be 700,000 families. Armies remain locked in a standoff for years to fight for victory on a single day. Yet generals begrudge bestowing ranks and emoluments of 100 pieces of gold, therefore do not know the enemy's situation. This is the ultimate inhumanity. Such a person is not a general for the people, an assistant for a ruler, or the arbiter of a victory. The means by which enlightened rulers and sagacious generals moved and conquered others, that their achievements surpassed the masses, was advanced knowledge. Advanced knowledge cannot be gained from ghosts and spirits, inferred from phenomena, or projected from the measures of heaven, but must be gained from men, for it is the knowledge of the enemy's true situation. Thus there are 5 types of spies to be employed: local spy, internal spy, turn spy, double agent, dead, expendable spy, and the living spy. When all 5 are employed together, and no one knows their Tao, this is termed spiritual methodology. They are a ruler's treasure. Local spies employ people from their local district. Internal spies employ their people who hold government positions. Double agents employ the enemy spies. Expendable spies are employed to spread disinformation outside the state. Provide our expendable spies with false information and have them leak it to enemy agents. Living spies return with their reports. Thus, all of the 3 armies' affairs, no relationship is closer than with spies. No rewards are more generous than those given to spies. No affairs are more secret than those pertaining to spies. Unless someone has the wisdom of a sage, he cannot use spies. Unless he is benevolent and righteous, he cannot employ spies. Unless he is subtle and perspicacious, he cannot perceive the substance in intelligent reports. It is subtle. There are no areas in which one does not employ spies. If before the mission has begun it is already been exposed, the spy and those he informed should all be put to death. In general, as for the armies you want to strike, the cities you want to attack, and the men you want to assassinate, You must first know the names of the defensive commander, his assistants, staff, door guards, and attendants. You must have our spies search out and learn them all. You must search for enemy agents who have come to spy on us. Tempt them with profits, instruct and retain them. Thus double agents can be obtained and employed. Through knowledge gained from them, you can recruit both local and internal spies. Through knowledge gained from them, the expendable spy can spread his falsehoods, can be used to misinform the enemy. Through knowledge gained from them, our living spies can be employed as times require. The ruler must know these 5 aspects of espionage work. This knowledge inevitably depends on turn spies, therefore you must be generous to double agents. In antiquity, when the yin rose, they had Aishi and Hisa. When the Shao arose, they had Lu Ya, the Taya Kung, and the Yin. Thus enlightened rulers and sagacious generals who are able to get intelligent spies will invariably attain great achievements. This is the essence of the military, what the 3 armies rely on to move. Well, we did it. We finished reading the 13 chapters of Sun Tzu, The Art of War, and I think there's actually different versions of it, so I was reading a new translation by Ralph D. Sawyer. It was just the copy that I picked up from my local library. So, I pretty much just did this for the memes. I was just memeing. If you know who Technoblade is, that's pretty much why I did it. But yeah, it was an interesting read to see what it was like back then. I don't know, it was pretty cool. And let me just say, the translator used a lot of big words for no reason. I was having some trouble. I had a decent amount of stumbles. Some words I've never heard before. I think he just wanted to sound smart. But yeah. One last thing, there was a bunch of extra, like hundreds of extra pages of him just analyzing random stuff. I just skipped that because I just wanted to keep the actual story. And thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment if you enjoyed the video. And I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.